Thanks, Edwin. Good afternoon, everyone. As Edwin said, my name's Steve White. I'm Software Development Manager at Rakon. Today I'll be talking to you a little bit about our experiences of implementing Scrum at Rakon in early 2012. And we'll also be taking a look at some high-level concepts around empowerment. I have to say, speaking as a manager, I'm a huge fan of empowering the team, because then that means if I get that right, I don't have to do any work. Just don't tell my team that. You're not recording this, are you? Let's get started. I'll give you a little bit of an overview of Rakon. It was founded in 1967. It's a manufacturer of frequency control products. Rakon's a global company. It has 9 manufacturing locations and 14 sales offices spread across the globe. Its products are sold into primarily the mobile, the telecommunications, positioning, and high reliability markets. This is Rakon's head office in Auckland. That's where I'm based. Auckland has quite a strong research and development focus and primarily targets the telecoms, positioning, and other consumer markets. Taking an example of an international phone call, your voice is coded into data and transmitted across quite a vast network consisting of base stations, switches, repeaters, satellite and microwave links. All of these pieces of equipment require a good frequency reference that give the frequency that the data is put on the network and then taken off the network again. And this is where Rakon's products come in. Rakon has products that are tailored to suit each of these individual applications. Rakon benefits from any rollout of new technology. So for all you smartphone users out there, please make sure you're using up your data caps each month and ask your providers about their rollout of 4G, because our products are right in there, and the rollout of those technologies creates a demand for our products. Inside the product there is a quartz crystal, and when you apply an electrical current to quartz crystal, it causes it to resonate in what's known as the piezoelectric effect. That resonation is what allows the product to emit a frequency. Now, because quartz is a natural product, the stresses caused by thermal expansion and contraction impact its performance. So a big part of what we do is testing the products over temperature to ensure that the specification that's required is met across the temperature range. And that's where software development comes in. So the software that we are building is not shipped with the product, it's used to manufacture the product. And here's a typical example of a system that we might build. There's a C#.NET application hooked up to a database to retrieve specifications and store outcomes. It'll be communicating with instrumentation such as power supplies and frequency counters. It'll be controlling the robotics of the manufacturing equipment by communicating with the PLC. And it will also be communicating with embedded firmware running in PIC micros, running on electronics within the equipment, and using that to test the devices. Back in 2012, we were aware that we had a lot of opportunities to improve the way we were delivering software. And at that time, we decided to embark on a Scrum implementation. And we partnered with Claris to provide training to the team and also to the management stakeholders. As part of our business case for switching to Scrum, we were expecting improvements in the way we manage change, improvements in transparency and the value delivered to the business. And we decided we wanted to measure these benefits, so we conducted a survey which was pre-Scrum, and then we repeated the survey after 1 year. The survey, we used the INSAT method, which categorises the scores into poor, average and good. And we were pretty stunned, as to be said, that our pre-Scrum survey results was around resounding 24. So we'd asked the business to be honest with us in assessing our performance, but I guess we didn't expect them to be so brutally honest. But I guess we could only go up from there, and after 1 year we repeated the survey and the score was 112, which, okay, it's still only average, but it's a good improvement and a good foundation for us to move forward on. So this is a slightly more detailed view of the results, and over the course of the year we were still doing the same types of projects. We had the same technologies involved, the same core team, the same stakeholders. The only thing that changed was that we were now delivering software using Scrum. And whilst we've still got room to improve, we're pretty pleased with the progress that we made over the course of the year. A couple of the dimensions on the survey, I think, align with the concepts of empowerment. That is, handling changes in requirement and managing conflicting priorities is really talking to the empowerment of the business. And I think it's interesting when you look at the literature around empowerment, there's very much a strong theme of empowering teams, but not really a lot of discussion on empowering the business. Looking at the principles behind the Agile Manifesto, we know that our highest priority is the customer and welcoming changing requirements. When you consider traditional methods of managing change, what they often ultimately end up doing is impeding change. Under Scrum, there are still processes for managing change, but these processes support change rather than impeding it. All the while, the impact on the team is minimised. Speaking to one of our product owners, he commented that the improvement in the visibility and control over software outcomes is like chalk and cheese following the switch to Scrum. And I think that really speaks to the empowerment of the business. So what is empowerment? If you look at the definitions around empowerment, there's references to having authority to achieve some outcome, trusting the team to make decisions that have material impacts on what's delivered. In empowerment takes more than a minute, it refers to 3 core concepts that need to exist in order to empower teams: sharing information, creating autonomy, and self-managed teams. And I think these concepts can be mapped onto Scrum without too much difficulty. Sharing information is important because without good information, you can't make good decisions. And this aligns with the Scrum concept of transparency. And it's really the transparency that's gained through the stories and the acceptance criteria and the discussions that are held between the product owner and the team that we hope to arm the team with the knowledge that they need in order to make good decisions. Creating autonomy through boundaries is speaking to making sure there's clarity in terms of how far does my authority extend. If you're operating in a zone where it's quite clear that you have authority, it makes it a lot easier to make good decisions. I think this clarity comes from the definitions around the Scrum roles, the product owner and the team and the processes, and also the clarity in terms of the stories and how far the stories extend and what the team is authorised to deliver. Self-managed teams is clearly a strong concept within Scrum, self-organising teams. Armed with good information and a good process and clarity around the boundaries, the team can then self-manage their delivery by identifying the tasks they need to do and progress it through the sprint and deliver value to the business. So why is this all important? There's a lot of evidence to suggest that empowered teams experience greater motivation and engagement, and this can flow through to improved job satisfaction and productivity. And it's particularly important in our industry, I think, because so long as the realistic expectations of salary are met, a lot of people in the software industry are creative types, and they're motivated more by being able to have the freedom to innovate and to express their creative ideas within a boundary that's been defined as acceptable by the business. This increased motivation and engagement we hope will flow through to improved customer outcomes, whether that be internal customers or external customers, and we'd expect this to materialise as improvements in quality and service. The improved team performance and customer satisfaction will reflect on the manager. But it also helps to manage complexity. If you're operating in a complex environment and a lot of that decision making is funneling up to a single point, you're going to find problems with the bandwidths of that individual. It's better to manage that complexity by dividing the problem and delegating the decision making down, and enable the manager to focus more on the bigger picture and the strategy. But ultimately, the reason that we empower teams is to improve company performance. Going back to the principles behind the Agile Manifesto, it makes reference to trusting the team to get the job done and self-organising teams, which are clearly empowerment concepts. Then it's got this reference in number 5 to give the team the environment and the support they need. So this environment is talking to their immediate working environment, but also the broader environment that they're interacting with the business and helping the team to resolve impediments. This is an area that's been particularly challenging for Rakon with the software that we build. Our Scrum teams are purely focused on software development, and for equipment and product we're dependent on other teams. And it's really these dependencies that the team has on these other departments and dependencies on gaining access to manufacturing equipment for testing and so forth that really provide a lot of challenges for us and often materialises in impediments to the team. So switching to Scrum, it's really hit us in the face just how much this impacts the productivity of the team. And we've had to adapt our processes, and currently we're trying to gather a lot of metrics around how this is impacting the team's ability to deliver, so then we can take that and have conversations with the other departments and see if we can improve that situation. And we've also had quite a renewed focus on continuous integration, building emulators so that we can automate our testing. With our emulation, the .NET software doesn't know whether it's talking to a piece of hardware or an emulator. From its perspective, they look identical. And this really helps us to alleviate those dependencies. Let's take a look at a couple of practical examples now. So I'm a team member of the Canterbury Software Summit project, and I receive a phone call from the organiser. They needed an empowerment presentation prepared for the Agile track. So being a diligent team member, I record this in the product backlog. A different way to word the story would be to say, well, as an attendee of the Agile track, I need a presentation that is engaging and thought-provoking to maximise the value of attending the Canterbury Software Summit. The key distinction here is the first story is focusing on the solution, whereas the second description is focusing on the outcome that's required. Likewise, for the acceptance criteria, we might say, well, the presentation has to be a PowerPoint with no more than 20 slides, and half of those have to have pictures and so forth. Or we might say the presentation accommodates different learning styles, appeals to attendees with a wide range of knowledge and backgrounds. So the first acceptance criteria, okay, it's more measurable, but the second acceptance criteria focuses on the outcome that's required. And I can't say, it depends on the context, which is appropriate, the first or the second, but the key message is that the way that you word the descriptions and the acceptance criteria in your stories is going to have a huge impact on the empowerment of the team. So we come to sprint planning, and we've pulled out the stories that we're going to deliver. And how often do you do this, where you get to the end of sprint planning and there's 5 minutes to go and you've got to come up with a sprint goal, and the goal ends up just paraphrasing the stories you've pulled in. Well, this sprint goal is absolutely useless. It adds no value to what we already know from looking at the stories. A different way to word that sprint goal would be to deliver an engaging and thought-provoking presentation to the CSS Agile track. And so through this, we hope to give the team scope to consider other solutions that we haven't presumed when we were writing the stories and planning the goal. It's interesting that with the Scrum Guide 2013, there's been this shift in focus, and there's a lot more focus going on the sprint goal as being a tool to guide the team. And through the daily stand-up, the team should be looking at the goal and shaping the stories and the work that they've got planned for the sprint. One thing that we've started doing that I would encourage is, rather than leaving it to planning to identify the sprint goals, bring that forward as part of the release planning process, so that you've got some visibility of the sprints coming up and what their goals would be, and use this to inform the product backlog refining efforts. Moving away from Scrum a little bit now to look at process empowerment. This can be quite a difficult area, and it's certainly an area that's challenged us on more than one occasion. To what extent are individuals in your team empowered to determine their own processes and the steps they follow to do their job? Is the team empowered to determine their processes? And then at the bigger picture, what about the departmental and the organisational processes? Is the team empowered to influence those? And it can be quite difficult to make decisions around this. One consideration is standardisation. So if you're running multiple teams, what does it look like if they're each following their own processes, and how does that impact the effectiveness of the department as a whole? Then does that impact the ability to move people between teams? And then how does that look from a business perspective if you were interacting with multiple teams and they're all following different processes? Is that confusing? And what about external standards such as the Scrum Guide? What is your context? Are you a strictly Scrum organisation, or is Scrum but okay? We had a situation recently where one of our teams decided that there was no value in the retrospectives, and they stopped having them. And that was a real challenge. It was counter to the principles of Agile. When we eventually resumed the retrospectives, there was all this flood of ideas and opportunities to improve, and this sort of built up demand to sort of bring these forward and act on them. And when we really drilled into it, the issue was not that the retrospective wasn't valuable, it was more that there was no follow-up, and there was frustration that they had these ideas that weren't being actioned and implemented. And part of that's my fault. There's an issue of empowerment there of the team, but it's also a shared responsibility that they need to make sure they're implementing the actions they've identified. So what we've started doing is putting stickers on our sprint board following the retrospective to make sure that we've got follow-up on the ideas that are coming out. Organisational culture is quite an important consideration. Is continuous improvement encouraged, or is it resisted? If continuous improvement is resisted, this is going to impact the team's ability to influence their processes at the fringes of where they're interacting with the business. If there's quite a strong culture against continuous improvement, it might even impact the team's willingness to improve their own processes. If you're in the market of a good book for leading agile teams, I'd certainly recommend Management 3.0. And there's a concept of the 7 levels of authority, and it's important to consider that whether it's part of a Scrum task or business as usual, at the point that you're assigning work, there is a level of authority that you can attach to that item. It's a continuum ranging from tell where the decisions are made by the manager through to delegate where the team makes their decisions. If you're running empowered teams, you might typically use an advise or an acquire leadership style. But just because you're running empowered teams doesn't mean that you can't sometimes use tell. You might have a phone call from the CEO, your biggest customer's got major issues, and if you don't sort it out, you're going to lose them. And in that situation, tell is appropriate. You might need to gather the team together and say, well, look, this is the situation. We don't have much time. This is what we've got to do. This is how we're going to do it. Any questions before we get going? So the important point is the context and thinking through that context and making sure that the level of authority that's attached to the task that's been assigned is clear. So then we provide clear boundaries to the team in terms of how far their authority extends. So here's this concept of context. You wouldn't hand your keys to the shiny brand new Ferrari to someone that's a learner driver, right? So what is the capability, maturity and motivation of the team? Are there any constraints for time or budget? What is the life cycle stage? It's easier to empower and have more degrees of freedom at the early stages of a project than at the tail end, where a lot of the decisions have been made and we're trying to close out. What is the complexity, risk and impact of the deliverable? Low risk and low impact tasks can be more easily assigned with a higher level of authority. So it's really ensuring that we've thought through the context and starting to think about, well, how can we set this person or team up for success? I think it's useful to have a mental delegation checklist where you're thinking through all the aspects relevant to the task that's been assigned with a viewpoint of trying to ensure a successful outcome. Do they have the skills and knowledge that are required? Is there support available to them if needed? Do they know what success looks like? Are their boundary conditions clear? And do they have the necessary tools, processes and standards? So really making sure you've thought through the task and have positioned it so that they can be successful and get the right outcome. Empowerment is every day, and empowerment is grown, and I think this is one of my learnings from Scrum, where you can't reasonably expect a team that's been accustomed to operating in an environment where they're not empowered to quickly transition to an environment where they're empowered. It's a journey, and it takes time, and different people will have different comfort levels, and they will go through that journey at different speeds, but everyone's got to go through that together, the team and the manager. And in the early days of Scrum, I was probably guilty of going through that a bit fast, and that caused a lot of concern for the team, and there was sort of resistance and pushback, and so we had to back up the bus a bit and then take it one step at a time and progress through that journey together. It's critical to know what motivates the team, and I think the one thing that I've learnt most out of this exercise of looking at empowerment is a buzzword. And it's easy to think that empowerment is something that you just do, but it's not. Empowerment is a way of thinking. At each time that you're assigning a task to a team member or to a team, thinking it through. What level of authority is appropriate given this situation? Have I thought through everything that needs to be in place in order for them to be successful? Have they got the knowledge and the capabilities? Do they know what success looks like? Is there the right support there that they need? So really thinking is the key to success. If you delegate something and they fail, how you respond to that will potentially have quite a big impact on that person or team's willingness to be empowered next time around. If they do fail, ask yourself, where did I get this wrong? Did you overestimate their competence? Were you not clear enough, and were they not quite clear what success looked like? So what would you do differently next time around in order to ensure a successful outcome? So the thoughts that you put in up front in delegating that task means that they can be successful, and then you can be successful. And reinforce the message. The key here is to achieve consistency. If on one hand we're saying we're running Scrum, so we've got empowered teams, and then we come to business as usual activity, and you're there as the manager saying, well, you do this, and you do this, and do this like this. What is the message that you're sending? They'll soon get the message that they're not empowered because the big boss is there and he's calling all the shots and telling everyone what to do. So ask rather than tell. And don't take away the decision. If they come to you for support and advice. Sometimes as managers we think we know it all and the solution's at the tip of our tongue. And if you throw that out there, what is the message that you're sending? You're telling them, well, it's okay, you don't need to use the brain that we're paying you for, because you can just bring your problems to me. Even if I've asked you to solve it, just bring it to me and I'll solve it for you, and we're all happy, right? And then next time they'll do it again. They'll bring it to you because they know that's easy, and you'll just provide the answers. So depending on the situation and whether it's critical or not, of course, but leave the decision with them. Provide them the support they need to make good choices and get the right outcome. But ultimately, if you've empowered them to do something, let them do it. And practice patience with your investment. It is a journey, it does take time, it is an investment from you with the promise of having a highly productive team that's empowered and can do great things. But if you give up on that journey too soon, well then you're throwing that investment away before you've reaped the benefit. So thanks for listening to my presentation today. I think we've got time for a couple of questions, and I'll be around later if you'd like to have a chat, or feel free to drop me a note on steve.white@rakon.com.
Have you got any questions?
Everything from what I understand, about Agile is that what will work for one company may not necessarily work for another company. I may be wrong about that, but that's what I understand. So, given your experience, would you work through your own process and then bring someone in to help you improve that process, or would you, in retrospect, get someone in from the beginning to help you with that process and then go from there?
Yeah, I think it really depends on your context, and I'd certainly recommend getting someone in to help. In our own context, manufacturing, our budget around training and so forth was quite limited, so we brought a surety in initially to provide some training, and then we pretty much went alone, and we attended the Agile meetups and so forth, and then we've brought a surety back in more recently to do a health check, which was great, and they spent time going around the team and gave us lots of suggestions on how we can improve. I think if I had a bigger budget, I would have certainly got more help to kick things off. I think the model where you provide some training first and then follow that up immediately after with intense sort of hands-on is quite critical, because often when you attend the training you think, well, this all sounds great, but how do I map that into my own environment, because our problems are different to what I'm seeing in the training material. So I think that transition just post the training is critical.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, Steve.